In the quiet corner of a shelter, a German shepherd with cancer let out a soft, heartbreaking cry. The staff knew his time was running out. His once bright eyes had dulled, as if he understood that his journey was coming to an end. But what happened that day left everyone speechless. It was an unexpected act of compassion that changed the fate of a dog on the brink of being euthanized, and touched the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Stories like this deserve to be shared. Jake was a 7-year-old German shepherd whose life had been defined by courage and service. Trained as a police dog, he spent his early years protecting others with unwavering loyalty, but an injury during a routine operation left him unable to continue his duties. Instead of retiring with honor, his handlers surrendered him to a shelter, where his bright future faded into obscurity. At first, Jake's noble bearing and sharp intelligence attracted attention. Visitors admired his proud stance and piercing eyes. But when they learned he was battling late-stage cancer, they quickly moved on, unwilling to take on the burden of his care. Over time, his health declined. His once glossy coat became patchy and dull, and his strong frame weakened. He began spending most of his days curled up on a thin blanket in the farthest kennel of the shelter. That morning, the shelter staff gathered to make the hardest decision. Jake had stopped eating 3 days ago, and his labored breathing filled the quiet corridors. The shelter was overcrowded, and resources were scarce. Richard, the shelter manager, stood by Jake's kennel with a clipboard in hand. "We're out of options," he said softly to his team. "It's time to let him go peacefully." Jake seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. He lifted his head slightly and let out a low, mournful whine. It was a sound that echoed through the hall, reaching the hearts of everyone present. Some turned away, unable to bear the sight of the proud dog reduced to this state. Others busied themselves with their tasks, trying to suppress the lump in their throats. As Richard prepared to open the kennel, the front door swung open with a loud creak. A gust of icy wind swept through, carrying the scent of freshly fallen snow. Standing in the doorway was Emily, a volunteer veterinarian who had worked closely with the shelter for years. Her eyes, already filled with concern, immediately landed on Jake. "What's going on?" she asked, hurrying toward the kennel. When she saw Jake's frail body, her breath caught in her throat. She knelt beside him, sliding her hand through the bars to stroke his head gently. Jake responded with a faint wag of his tail, a flicker of the spirit that once defined him. Richard sighed. "Emily, we've done everything we can. He's in pain, and it's kinder to let him go now." Emily's jaw tightened. "You're wrong. He's not done fighting. Look at him. He still has life in his eyes." She turned to face the staff, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "He's given everything to the world. The least we can do is give him one last chance." "Emily, it's not about what he deserves," Richard said, his tone softening. "It's about resources. We don't have the means to care for him any longer." "Then let me take him," Emily said firmly. "I'll handle his expenses, his treatment, everything. Just give me the chance to save him." The room fell silent. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, knowing that the shelter couldn't afford to spare resources on a dog with such a slim chance of recovery. But Emily's determination was undeniable. After a long pause, Richard relented. "You've got 48 hours, he said. "If you can't find a solution by then, we'll have no choice." Emily didn't waste a moment. She signed the release papers and opened the kennel door. Jake struggled to stand, his legs shaky, but he managed to take a few steps toward her. She wrapped him in a thick blanket, cradling him as she carried him to her car. "You're safe now, Jake," she whispered. "I won't let you down." As they drove away from the shelter, Emily glanced at Jake through the rearview mirror. His eyes were half closed, his breathing slow but steady. For the first time in weeks, he seemed to relax. Emily's heart swelled with determination. She didn't know what the next 48 hours would hold, but she was certain of one thing: she wouldn't give up on him. Emily's car hummed softly as she drove through the snow-dusted streets toward her small countryside home. She glanced at Jake in the rearview mirror, bundled in a thick blanket, his head resting against the car door. His breathing was steady but shallow, and his once vivid eyes were dim with exhaustion. Still, There was something in his gaze, a flicker of trust, fragile yet undeniable. When Emily pulled into her driveway, the world around her seemed untouched by the chaos of the shelter. Her home was modest, surrounded by sprawling fields now blanketed in snow. The warm glow of her porch light illuminated the path as she carefully lifted Jake from the car. He didn't resist, his body limp in her arms, though his tail gave a weak wag as they approached the door. Inside, the smell of pine and wood smoke greeted them. Emily had prepared a soft bed near the fireplace, layering it with blankets and cushions. She laid Jake down gently, covering him with another blanket before sitting beside him. Her hand rested on his head, stroking the coarse fur that had once been sleek and strong. "This is your home now," she said softly. "You're safe here." Jake closed his eyes, his breathing steady as the warmth of the fire enveloped him. Emily watched him for a long moment, her chest tightening at the sight of his frail frame. She could see the toll the cancer had taken. His ribs protruded sharply, and the tumor on his side was an ever-present reminder of the battle he was fighting. She stood and walked to the kitchen, her mind racing with thoughts of what needed to be done. She dialed the number of a close friend and colleague, Dr. Miller, a veterinarian who specialized in oncology. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Emily, what's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "I need your help," she said quickly. "I've taken in a German Shepherd with advanced cancer. He was set to be euthanized at the shelter today, but I couldn't let that happen. I need to know if there's anything at all, we can do for him." Dr. Miller hesitated. "Emily, you know how difficult this will be. Late-stage cancer in dogs is hard to treat, and even if we try, the chances are slim." "I don't care about the odds," she replied, her voice
firm. "I just need to know if we can give him more time, if there's a way to make his last days comfortable." There was a pause on the other end before Dr. Miller sighed. "Bring him in tomorrow morning. I'll run some tests and see what we're dealing with. But, Emily, be prepared for the worst." "I am," she said quietly. "Thank you." After hanging up, Emily prepared a bowl of warm broth for Jake, hoping to entice him to eat. When she returned to the living room, he opened his eyes and sniffed the air, his nose twitching slightly. She knelt beside him, holding the bowl close. "Come on, Jake," she coaxed gently. "You need your strength." Slowly, he lifted his head and lapped at the broth, his movements sluggish but deliberate. Emily felt a surge of relief as he finished half the bowl before resting his head again. "Good boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "You're a fighter. We'll get through this together." That night, Emily stayed by his side, her hand resting on his back as he slept. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the room. Jake's breathing was steady, his body rising and falling in rhythm with the quiet. Emily's thoughts raced as she planned for the morning ahead, transporting him to the clinic, discussing treatment options, and finding a way to fund whatever care he needed. But beneath her anxiety was a growing sense of hope. Jake had already endured so much, yet he was still here, still fighting. As she watched him sleep, she couldn't help but feel that their paths had crossed for a reason. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. But inside, beside the warmth of the fire, a bond was forming, one that neither Emily nor Jake could have anticipated. The next morning, Emily woke to the soft sound of Jake shifting on his bed. The fire had burned down to embers, and the room was bathed in the pale light of dawn. She stretched, her body stiff from a night spent on the couch beside him. When she looked at Jake, her heart lifted slightly. Though still weak, he had managed to lift his head, his eyes tracking her movements with quiet curiosity. "Morning, Jake," she said softly, kneeling beside him. She gently ran her hand over his head, her fingers brushing against his ears. "We've got a big day ahead." After a quick breakfast, Emily carefully helped Jake into her car. He moved slowly, his legs shaky but determined. She wrapped him in a blanket and placed a cushion beneath him for comfort. As she drove to Dr. Miller's clinic, she spoke to him in a soothing voice, telling him stories of the dogs she'd treated and the ones who had defied the odds. Jake's ears twitched occasionally, as if he were listening. When they arrived, Dr. Miller was waiting outside, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. He opened the car door and crouched down to greet Jake. "So, this is the fighter you told me about," he said, his tone warm. Jake blinked slowly, his tail giving the faintest of wags. Emily smiled faintly. That's him. His name is Jake. With Dr. Miller's help, they carried Jake inside to an exam room. The clinic was quiet, the usual bustle of patients replaced by the soft hum of medical equipment. Emily stayed by Jake's side as Dr. Miller began his examination, gently palpating the tumor on Jake's side and checking his vitals. He's stable for now, Dr. Miller said, jotting notes on a clipboard. But this tumor is aggressive. I'll need to run a few tests to see how far the cancer has spread. Emily nodded, her hands resting on Jake's back. Do whatever you need to do. Over the next hour, blood samples were taken, X-rays were captured, and Jake remained remarkably calm throughout. Emily spoke to him in hushed tones, her voice a steady anchor in the unfamiliar environment. When the tests were done, Dr. Miller invited her to his office while Jake rested in a recovery room. Dr. Miller placed the X-rays on a light board, pointing to the shadowed areas where the tumor had infiltrated. It's advanced, Emily, he said gently. The cancer has spread to his lungs. Surgery isn't an option, and chemotherapy would only buy him a little time. Emily's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay composed. What about palliative care, pain management, anything to keep him comfortable? Dr. Miller nodded. That's definitely possible. We can start him on medication to manage his pain and improve his quality of life. With proper care, he could have a few more months, maybe longer if he responds well. Emily exhaled slowly, relief mingling with the weight of the news. Then that's what we'll do. He deserves that much. Dr. Miller smiled faintly. You're giving him a gift, Emily. Not many people would take this on. It's not a gift, she said, her voice steady. It's what he deserves. That afternoon, Emily brought Jake home with a bag of medications and a detailed care plan. She set up a schedule for his doses, along with a strict diet to help him regain strength. Jake seemed more alert, his eyes following her movements as she prepared his food and laid out his bedding. As the days passed, Jake began to show small but encouraging signs of improvement. His appetite returned and he started wagging his tail more often. Though his walks were short and slow, he seemed eager to explore the yard, sniffing at the snow and lifting his head to the crisp winter air. Emily documented every moment, snapping photos and writing notes about his progress. She shared his story on social media, hoping to inspire others and possibly raise funds for his care. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in, along with donations from people touched by Jake's journey. One evening, as Emily sat by the fire with Jake resting at her feet, she scrolled through the messages on her phone. One in particular caught her attention, a retired K-9 officer who had worked with German Shepherds for decades. Jake sounds like an amazing dog, the message read. If you ever need help, let me know. Dogs like him deserve all the love in the world. Emily looked down at Jake, who opened one eye and thumped his tail against the floor. Hear that, Jake? People are rooting for you. Jake let out a soft huff, his eyes closing again. For the first time since bringing him home, Emily felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Hope. Winter mornings at Emily's house were calm and peaceful. Outside, the snow glistened under the pale sunlight, but inside, the warmth of the fireplace filled the air with comfort. Jake had grown stronger in the days since his first vet visit. Though still battling cancer, his spirit seemed renewed, and his bond with Emily deepened with every passing moment. Emily noticed subtle changes in him. His appetite had improved, and he was no longer hesitant to eat the special meals she prepared. His once dull eyes now carried a spark of curiosity, following her every movement. Even his tail, once still and lifeless, wagged gently whenever she spoke to him. That morning, Emily decided to let Jake venture outside for a short walk. Bundled in her coat and boots, she clipped a leash to his collar and opened the door. Jake hesitated at first, sniffing the cold air, but then he stepped forward with cautious determination. His paws crunched against the snow as he explored the yard, his nose buried in every patch of frost. You're doing great, Jake, Emily encouraged, her voice light. He paused, looking back at her with a wag of his tail, as if to say, I've got this. Their routine walks became a daily ritual, each one a little longer than the last. The fresh air and gentle exercise seemed to breathe new life into Jake. His posture became stronger, and his steps grew steadier. Emily couldn't help but smile as she watched him rediscover simple joys. like the thrill of chasing a falling snowflake, or the satisfaction of rolling in the snow. One afternoon, while they were out in the yard, a car pulled into Emily's driveway. It was a black SUV, and the driver stepped out wearing a thick jacket and a warm smile. Emily immediately recognized him. It was Officer Mark Stevens, the retired K-9 handler who had messaged her after hearing about Jake's story. "Emily, it's nice to finally meet you," Mark said, extending a hand. "And this must be Jake." Jake's ears perked up at the sound of his name, and he approached Mark cautiously. The officer knelt down, letting Jake sniff his hand before giving him a gentle pat on the head. "You're a good boy, aren't you?" Mark said, his tone soft and familiar. "He's come a long way," Emily said, watching as Jake warmed up to the stranger. "When I brought him home, I wasn't sure he'd even make it through the first night." Mark nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Dogs like Jake are fighters. They don't give up easily, even when the odds are stacked against them." The two sat on the porch, sharing stories about Jake's progress and Mark's years working with K-9 units. Mark explained how dogs like Jake had a unique resilience, forged through years of training and an innate drive to protect and serve. "Even when they're down, they're never truly out," he said with a smile. As they talked, Jake lay at Emily's feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. Mark studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Have you ever thought about letting him reconnect with some of his old training? It might give him a sense of purpose." Emily hesitated. "I hadn't considered that. I've been so focused on his health, I didn't think about what he might need emotionally." Mark nodded. "Physical healing is important, but mental and emotional strength go hand in hand. Even something as simple as teaching him commands or playing structured games can make a world of difference." Inspired by Mark's advice, Emily decided to introduce small training sessions into Jake's routine. At first, they started with basic commands like sit and stay. To her surprise, Jake responded eagerly, his ears perking up with every word. It was as if he remembered his old training, and the familiar exercises brought him a newfound sense of pride. As the days turned into weeks, Jake's progress became undeniable. He no longer seemed like a dog weighed down by illness, but one filled with determination and hope. Emily couldn't believe the transformation, and neither could Mark, who continued to visit regularly to offer guidance and encouragement. One evening, as Emily sat by the fire with Jake resting his head on her lap, she thought back to the day she had found him at the shelter. The frail, defeated dog she had brought home was now a fighter, reclaiming his life one step at a time. "You're incredible, Jake," she said softly, running her fingers through his fur. Jake let out a contented sigh, his tail thumping gently against the floor. In that moment, Emily realized that Jake wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The transformation in Jake was nothing short of miraculous. His steps were steadier, his tail wagged more often, and there was a newfound brightness in his eyes that Emily hadn't seen since she brought him home. Every day felt like a small victory, and with each one, their bond grew stronger. Emily began incorporating more structured training into Jake's routine, inspired by Officer Mark's advice. At first, it was simple tasks, responding to commands like sit and stay. Jake took to the exercises with a surprising eagerness, his ears perking up with each word of encouragement. The training sessions became their special time together, a way for Jake to reconnect with his past and for Emily to witness his resilience firsthand. One crisp morning, Emily decided to take things a step further. She had set up a small obstacle course in the backyard, using cones, boxes, and a plank to simulate some of the challenges Jake might have faced during his time as a police dog. At first, he hesitated, his body unsure of its own strength, but with Emily's gentle encouragement, he began to navigate the course. Each successful attempt met with cheers and treats. "You've still got it, Jake," Emily said, smiling as he completed the course for the first time. Jake barked softly in response, his tail wagging as if he understood her words. The sight filled Emily with pride and hope. It wasn't just about physical recovery anymore. Jake was regaining his confidence and sense of purpose. Later that day, Officer Mark visited again, bringing with him a bag of supplies. "I thought you might need these," he said, pulling out a harness, a ball, and a few other items. Tools of the trade. Jake's ears perked up at the sight of the ball, his body leaning forward slightly, as if ready to spring into action. Mark chuckled. "Looks like someone remembers what this is for." The three of them spent the afternoon working together. Mark showed Emily how to use the harness for more advanced exercises, while Jake eagerly participated, his tail wagging with every command. By the end of the session, Jake was panting but happy, his body visibly stronger than it had been weeks ago. As the sun began to set, Emily and Mark sat on the porch, watching Jake rest in the yard. His head was raised, his ears swiveling as he listened to the sounds of the countryside. "You've done something incredible here," Mark said, his voice filled with admiration. "You didn't just save him, you gave him his life back." Emily looked at Jake, her chest swelling with emotion. "I think he saved me just as much as I saved him." The following days brought more milestones. Jake started responding to new challenges with an energy Emily hadn't seen before. He tackled the obstacle course with ease, and his playfulness returned in full force. Whether it was chasing the ball across the yard or curling up by the fire at night, every moment with Jake felt like a gift. But Emily knew they weren't out of the woods yet. His cancer was still a looming presence, and every small victory was a reminder of how precious their time together was. She continued to monitor his health closely, working with Dr. Miller to ensure Jake's pain was managed and his quality of life remained high. One evening, as Emily sat by the fire, she received a message on her phone. It was from a local community group that had seen her social media posts about Jake. They wanted to feature his story in their newsletter, calling it a tale of resilience and love. Emily felt a lump in her throat as she read their words. Jake's journey wasn't just inspiring her, it was touching the lives of others. She looked over at Jake, who was stretched out on his bed, his eyes half closed in contentment. "You're famous now," she teased, leaning down to scratch behind his ears. Jake let out a low, happy huff, his tail thumping against the floor. In that quiet moment, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Jake had come into her life when she least expected it, and in the process, he had reminded her of the power of hope, love, and second chances. Winter began to give way to early spring, and with it came small but significant changes. The snow that once blanketed the countryside began to melt, revealing patches of green grass. The crisp air softened, and the warmth of the sun lingered longer each day. For Emily and Jake, the shift in seasons mirrored the transformation in their lives, an emergence from hardship into something brighter. Jake's progress was remarkable. His strength had returned to the point where he could manage long walks around the property. His tail wagged more freely, and his playful energy was contagious. Emily often found herself laughing as he bounded after a ball or nosed at her hands for treats. It was hard to believe that just weeks ago, he had been a frail, broken dog on the verge of being euthanized. One afternoon, Emily decided to take Jake to a nearby park, a place where he could run freely for the first time since his recovery began. She loaded him into the car, his tail thumping against the seat as he gazed out the window. The park was quiet, with only a few other dog owners scattered along the trails. Emily unclipped his leash, and for a moment, Jake hesitated. Then, as if realizing the freedom before him, he took off in a steady trot, his nose to the ground as he explored. Watching him run brought tears to Emily's eyes. He wasn't just surviving, he was living. Each stride, each wag of his tail, was a testament to his resilience and the bond they had forged. She called out to him, and he turned, bounding back to her with a joyful bark. "Good boy, Jake," she said, kneeling to hug him. He leaned into her embrace, his tongue darting out to lick her cheek. That evening, back home, Emily sat by the fire with Jake curled at her feet. She scrolled through her phone, reading messages from people who had followed Jake's story. One stood out, a woman named Claire, who wrote about how Jake's journey had inspired her to adopt an older dog from a local shelter. "Your story gave me the courage to give another dog a second chance," the message read. "Thank you for sharing his journey." Emily set the phone down, her hand resting on Jake's back. "You're changing lives, you know that?" she said softly. Jake lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers with a look that seemed almost knowing. She smiled, scratching behind his ears. "You're amazing, Jake." But despite the joy of Jake's recovery, Emily remained acutely aware of the fragility of their time together. The cancer was still there, an unrelenting presence that couldn't be ignored. Dr. Miller had warned her that no matter how strong Jake seemed, his condition was terminal. Every day was a gift, and Emily was determined to make the most of it. As the weeks passed, Emily noticed subtle changes in Jake's behavior. He tired more easily, and there were days when his energy waned. She adjusted their routine to match his needs, ensuring he was comfortable and surrounded by love. Even on his quieter days, Jake's spirit never wavered. His eyes still lit up when she spoke to him, and his tail still wagged at the sound of her voice. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emily rested her head against Jake's. The colors in the sky, soft oranges and purples, seemed to mirror the bittersweet emotions in her heart. "You've given me so much," she whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." Jake let out a soft sigh, his body relaxing against hers. In that moment, Emily realized that Jake had already taught her the most important lesson of all. Love is not measured by time, but by the depth of connection. Their bond, forged in the face of adversity, would remain with her forever. Spring continued to unfold, bringing new life to the world around them. Flowers bloomed, birds returned, and the fields turned a vibrant green. Emily and Jake spent every moment they could together, creating memories that would last a lifetime. And though she knew their journey together was finite, she also knew it was filled with a love that transcended all boundaries. As spring fully bloomed, the countryside surrounding Emily's home came alive with color and sound. The fields were dotted with wildflowers, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Jake spent most of his days lying in the sun, his fur warm from its rays, while Emily worked nearby in her garden. Despite his illness, Jake remained a picture of quiet strength, his presence a constant source of comfort and joy. One morning, Emily noticed Jake moving slower than usual. His steps, once steady, were now tentative, and his breathing seemed more labored. Concerned, she knelt beside him, stroking his head gently. "Are you okay, boy?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Jake looked up at her with his warm, soulful eyes, and she felt her chest tighten. Emily called Dr. Miller, who arrived later that day to examine Jake. His expression was kind but serious as he spoke. "He's nearing the end, Emily. You've given him so much love and care, but the cancer is progressing. It's time to think about what's best for him." The words hung heavy in the air, and Emily felt a wave of emotion rise within her. She had known this moment would come, but no amount of preparation could ease the ache in her heart. She nodded slowly, her hand resting on Jake's back. "I just want him to be at peace," she whispered. Over the next few days, Emily focused entirely on Jake. She cooked his favorite meals, spent hours sitting with him in the sun, and showered him with affection. Each moment was precious, and she cherished every wag of his tail, every gentle nuzzle, and every soft sigh. On Jake's final morning, Emily set up a blanket in the yard, under the shade of a large oak tree. The air was warm, and the sound of birds filled the space around them. She lay beside him, her hand resting on his chest as he breathed slowly. "You're the best dog I've ever known," she said, her voice breaking. "You've brought so much light into my life. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey." Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with the same trust and love he had shown from the moment she brought him home. His tail gave a faint wag, and Emily felt tears spill down her cheeks. She stayed with him, whispering words of love and gratitude, until his breathing slowed and he drifted peacefully into rest. The days that followed were quiet and somber. Emily missed Jake deeply, but she also felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the time they had shared. His presence had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. Through him, she had learned the true meaning of resilience, compassion, and unconditional love. Determined to honor Jake's legacy, Emily began volunteering more frequently at the shelter where she had first found him. She shared his story with anyone who would listen, hoping to inspire others to give second chances to dogs like Jake. His memory became a driving force in her efforts to advocate for older and terminally ill animals, showing the world that their lives, too, were filled with value and meaning. One afternoon, Emily received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of Jake, taken during one of their walks in the park. Alongside it was a handwritten note from Officer Mark. "Jake's story will live on through you. Thank you for showing the world what love can do." Emily placed the photo on her mantle, beside a small collar tag engraved with Jake's name. She smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart despite the ache of loss. Jake may have been gone, but his legacy of love and resilience would remain with her forever. As the sun set over the countryside, Emily stood by the window, gazing out at the fields. The light bathed the world in hues of gold and orange, and for a moment she felt Jake's presence, strong, comforting, and eternal. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Jake, for everything." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the beauty of the world they had shared, Emily knew that Jake's spirit would always be with her, guiding her to continue the work they had started together. Jake's story is a powerful reminder that love and compassion can transform even the most challenging circumstances. Though his time was brief, his legacy of resilience, loyalty, and courage continues to inspire. Through his journey, we see the beauty of second chances and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. If Jake's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to show your support for stories like his. Share this video with someone who loves dogs or needs a reminder of the power of hope and kindness. Together, we can honor Jake's memory by spreading awareness and inspiring others to give second chances to animals in need. Thank you for watching, and remember, every act of compassion, no matter how small, can change a life. Let's make a difference, one story at a time.